All right, thank you very much, and it's really wonderful to be here. Also great that all you guys were very keen to come and listen to this talk. So today I will talk about Sticklebacks uncovered, and I'm a scientist in the University of Cambridge, and I'm really interested in animal behavior, and in particular how individuals might actually have a role in how groups of animals behave. So I'm now at the third year of my PhD. So I thought, let's start with just telling you about how this came to be. Why do you like animal behavior that much? So let's see where I can stand. Yeah. So when I was very young, I just liked watching animal behavior, just seeing even how gulls like bread, the foraging habits of horses, and also getting plant specimens with my sister when I was very young. But also understanding the bird skulls. So with my dad, we were picking up these dead birds on the beach and then looking at their skulls. But yeah, after my high school, I decided to go traveling for a year. So I went to Australia, to Thailand and New Zealand. And this was a really great opportunity for me to go and explore. And during this year, it was really that I decided, okay, I really want to be a biologist. I want to understand more about this beautiful world around us. So what I decided to do is to study a bachelor's in biology in the north of the Netherlands in a city called Groningen. And during these 3 years, I did a range of things, from studying the genetics to cell mechanisms. But really what I wanted to do is, again, study this animal behavior. So here you can see a couple pictures of a couple projects I've done. You can see here a baby jackdaw, which is a species of crows, and we were weighing them on weighing scales to see how that, how individuals differ from each other. This picture is me in a lab, and we use these red lights because the rats can barely see this color, so for them it seems dark. But we can still study their behavior as if it's during the night. And here you can see me with another crow species, which is a rook. And these are really clever birds. So in Cambridge, we have an aviary where we work with these birds. And I set up a task to look at this cognition. But this is just to show you some things I've done in the past. Because later I will mainly focus on the work I did with the Sticklebacks. So this was during my undergrad. During my master's in the Netherlands as well, I did these other projects. But I decided to go abroad as well to really get some more experience and work with primates in particular. So I decided to see if I could work in some research projects abroad. And it was this PhD student who really needed help in South Africa near Cape Town. And you have these really cool groups of baboons there that live on this peninsula and explore, they explore these quite barren lands in search of food. And what we did, we just observed their behavior throughout the day for a couple months in a row. And it was really great to be with these primates and see the very interesting behaviors out there. So that was for a couple months, and then I went to Indonesia, and I worked with another primate. So again, I was a field assistant, so I came into this really cool kind of nature camp in the middle of the rainforest, and every day we would get up very early, and we go out and explore and see what all these orangutans and gibbons are doing. So these really beautiful, grand primate here, and it was not always easy to find them because they roam through the whole forest. But we've had some really interesting follows, and even at one point, one of the orangutans, she gave birth while 30 meters high up in a tree, and her placenta just fell next to me on the ground. And that was like an experience of a lifetime. Luckily, it didn't fall on top of me. So again, I came back to Europe, and I had already experience with some work with the crow species, and I heard about this job of a research assistant in Cambridge. And luckily, I was able to get this. So for the next 2 years, I actually worked with these wild population of jackdaws. And jackdaw is another very clever crow species, and they're very social. You might see them around here in London, where they are quite bold and they search around for food. But also near Cambridge have these really big populations. And what we did is we set up this nest box population and then really studying all their kinds of natural behaviors. And although this was really exciting, I thought it's really time now to do my own project. I had loads of ideas, and I was particularly started to get interested in these individual differences in behavior. So during this job, I applied for a number of grants, and I was very lucky to get a BBSRC scholarship. So they gave me money for a couple of years to really do my own project. And this was, again, this was in Cambridge to work on the Sticklebacks. And this is mainly what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I already told you before, I'm very interested in, one, the individual differences in behavior, and then two, how that affects collective behavior. So what's better than just show you some really visual appealing examples of collective behavior. So collective behavior is maybe a complex sounding term for just general grouping behavior that you can see throughout the animal world. So this is really spectacular kind of behavior you can see in big fish schools, but also loads of birds have these kind of massive group patterns where they try to avoid predators. And you can also see this in this kind of collective behavior and social decision making in very different patterns, like here the V-shaped formations of geese, and here also this is in the Serengeti, where they filmed like these massive groups of herbivores moving across the plains. And this has really like fascinated me, like what's going on there? How do they move together? Who decides to go where they want to go? And what if everybody goes there, but you want to go the other way? Like, how does this really work? And I was not the only one to be interested in that. And a lot of research has really started to understand what's happening here. So it's really important to understand that groups, individuals may receive benefits of being together with others. So the main two reasons are because it's much safer against predators, and it might also give you benefits for finding food. You can expect that if there's other individuals near you, the chance that you together might find food is higher. Of course, it comes with a competition as well, because you might both want that piece of food. But in general, there are these benefits. However, for animals to receive these benefits, what they have to do is they have to time and coordinate their behavior. And in this way, you actually get these massive group patterns, these collective motion. And then often, in many species, you also get that certain leaders and follower social roles arise. So there's been quite a lot of work that in both the natural and social sciences from people thinking like, okay, so we have these beautiful patterns of behavior, but like, let's really try to get down to this and really understand it in the most simple way. So if you have this group of individuals, what is the most simple explanation for what we can see here? Do they have some kind of group idea of what they're all doing? Well, what has been shown is actually that these groups, these complex patterns of behavior, can be explained by every individual following from some very simple rules. And if all these individuals using the same simple rules, if you add them up, then you get this massive group pattern. That's just in one sentence the simple idea behind it. And the rules they are using are these three. So imagine you are a fish or whatever species. You have a zone of repulsion, which means that if individuals get very near to you, you will try to avoid them. It's similar like being in the subway here or in the metro. You don't want to be too close to this other person. There's also actually a zone of attraction, whereby you try to be close to others if they're quite far away. And in the middle, you have a zone of alignment. So when you see other individuals at a certain distance, you would try to move in the same way with them. And this has been studied by theoretical models as well as experimental work, as you can see here, that really shows this is the case. So this has been done with fish, for example. This is based on like hundreds of fish, and this is where you can find other fish relative to the focal fish. So you can see a blue circle, which means there's very few fish actually near the fish, the focal fish on average. There's many in the front and many in the back, and then further away there's no fish again. So this is really great, like a very important finding that has influenced a lot of work. However, I think there's a little bit of a problem, because all these experiments and these models, they assume that groups are homogeneous, that every individual is the same, they use the same rules. But of course we know that it's not true, because individuals vary from one another. Individuals have different needs and different backgrounds. So think, for example, if you have a group, isn't it better to be in the center of the group? Because if you're in the edge and there's a predator coming, the chance of being eaten is maybe much higher. Also, maybe males and females might have different ways of responding because they have different ways to behave. Also, there might be differences in body size, and large individuals might be much more motivated to find food because they have to get energy for the whole body. And then also there's actually personality differences. So, and this is really what I'm very interested in, that has become a really big topic in my field over the last couple of years. So let me explain really what we mean with that. And for that I'd like to show you my two cats. So this is my cat Pluk, and this is my cat Max. So Max is a really lazy cat, so he's really good at finding unusual positions to sleep in. Well, Pluk is quite adventurous, and she likes to balance herself in like kind of unstable features of our house, for example. And this is just an example that in their life, they always show these differences in behavior. So Max is more or less always quite lazy, and Pluk is always quite bold. And you might have pets yourself, or you know people with pets, and you know they often show these very different differences in behavior. But this is actually something we can see throughout the animal world. So here you can see really a range of species that all also have personality. So to restate what we mean with personality, it is that individuals are different from one another, and that these differences are consistent over time. So this is normally plotted in a way like here, where you have the behavior on one day and then behavior on another day. And that individuals that on the first day behave like this, for example, they are shy, then they also shy in the second day. And this personality has now been shown for more than 100 species, and to have really important links to the life of animals. So it influences how they go and find food, how they find a partner, how successful they are in raising their offspring, so they're young, and how they deal with predators, and also how their behavior organization works, so how individuals, how societies are influenced by this. But surprisingly, there has not been that much work linking this back to this collective behavior, what I talked about before. So you have these complex group movements that are mainly now the theoretical models based on this homogeneity. And then we have this personality. And I thought, like, this is really fascinating, and this is what I want to study for my PhD. So this is the link between these personality traits on the one hand, collective behavior on the other hand, and then how they influence one another. And to study this, I work with three-spined sticklebacks, which is this really great fish species that is very common throughout the Northern Hemisphere. So this fish species was actually already described by Linnaeus back in 1758. And the name he gave it is, the first, Linnaeus always gives the genus name, so it's Gastrostius, and then the species name is Aculeatus. So this first part of the name is the genus with all the other kind of stickleback species there are. And I believe there's about 8 other species of stickleback, such as, I think this is a C stickleback and a 9-spine stickleback. So it's really amazing that Linnaeus, who this society here is named for and originated from, that he already, back in that time, described this fish. And what's quite nice, actually, that the Linnean Society has a collection with all Linnaeus, specimens. So I just wanted to show you that. Let's see. Yeah. So you have the website, and you have the Linnean collection, and you can actually go there, and you can find all these really fascinating old archives of Linnaeus. And we just found out there's actually a couple of his specimens down in a safe, where he actually has these 3-spine sticklebacks from a couple of centuries ago, and he dried them on paper. So these are the real specimens he used when he was naming the species. So yeah, it's really interesting. You might want to have a look there. So of course, for my studies, what I really wanted to understand is this social grouping behavior. And the stickleback is a great species for this, because they show this shoaling behavior here, where, like in the previous video, you saw this massive bowl of fish. The sticklebacks don't show that big patterns of group behavior, but they still show this very nice coordinated behavior. And the stickleback is also really great, is because they have been a model system for understanding a number of very different topics, from evolution to social decision-making and many other aspects, but also on animal personality. So I would now like to show you a little bit about my lab that I set up to study sticklebacks together with my colleagues. So let's get into my lab. So here you can see a general overview of my lab, where you can see some big social housing tanks and a net that I use to catch the fish. So because the sticklebacks are so common, I can just go out in Cambridge, get my car, get a couple hundred sticklebacks, and then put them in my lab here. And the lab here is under such conditions that for the sticklebacks, it's as if they're always in autumn. So it's quite cold, and the light is not that long during the day. Because what's very interesting, if you would have these tanks outside, and you have the rise and fall of temperatures during the day and throughout the year, as well as the longer light levels during spring and summer, the sticklebacks change considerably, whereby the males become very territorial. They want to find females to impress. They make these nests. So you have loads of very interesting other behaviors. But what they do less is this shoaling behavior. They become much more individual. And that is what I'm not interested in. So therefore, we set up this lab in this way so we could really study this shoaling behavior. Here you can see another photo. And this is, for example, a social housing tank. So it has nice cover for them. And they will be in these tanks for a couple months before I start experiments. So here's just a close-up for you to see. So these fish are like about 5 centimeters big, and they have these 3 spines that we hopefully see somewhere. They have 3 spines on their back, and they have 2 fins on their sides and a big tail fin. And they can swim in both ways. So if there's a predator, they will often raise their spine to protect themselves and swim very fast with their tail fin. Or if they're quite relaxed exploring around, they use their side fins. So it's quite cute to see that. And what you can also see is that they all look quite different. You can see they differ in their size, in their colors a little bit, and also in the way they behave, of course. So, because most of my work is focused on understanding these variability in animals, the personalities, what I need to do is I need to get all these individual fish and then get their behavior. So to really be able to do that, I need to be able to identify them. And when they are in this massive tank, for me they all look the same, so I can't really know who is who. So what I did is I built these custom holding tanks. And if you can see here, they consist of all kinds of compartments. And what I do is I get all these fish that I want to test from this big tank, and I put them in these individual compartments. And the fish can still see each other through like a transparent wall, but I can test them individually and then put them back and still know who is who. But for some bigger experiments I'm doing to understand the social behavior, I really need to know what they're doing in their group. So for this, I give them a small tag on their spine. And this is a great non-invasive method, which means that the Sticklebacks are not really influenced by it. I can put such a tag on their back within 20 seconds or so when they're still, when I'm holding them in the wet fish net. And then when I'm done with testing, I remove it. So in this way, I can still know when they're together who is who. So here's some photos of my testing setup. And what I made is this really controlled environment to test their behavior, because I'm interested in the natural variation amongst animals. And what you get if you would test individuals in an experiment is a lot of experimental error because of noise effects or differences in light levels. So I really try to standardize that as much as possible. So I built these wooden boxes, and each box can then be used to place a custom-built tank. For example, this tank here I use for testing boldness, which I'll explain later. And then each box is, for each fish, it will be exactly the same. They have the same plant, the same light levels, the same duration of testing. And this is really great, and I find therefore there's a lot of this natural variation. And next to that, I have an automated environment. And this not only helps me to, again, control this experimental error, it saves me a lot of time. So what I use these Raspberry Pi computers. I don't know if anybody of you know what this is, but this is basically it. It's a computer that costs around 30 pounds, and you have this really cool HD camera. And what I could do is I give each of these boxes such a camera, and then I connect them to my computer, and then I can simply, on my computer, control all these boxes at the same time. And in this way, I get loads of videos that I then, instead of sitting there and watching the videos and determining what the fish are doing, I have my software actually do that for me. So here you can see an example, because I track the fish when they go out of cover, for example. So this tracking software will give me the behavioral data of the fish, and then I, of course, have to check it afterwards. But it saves me a lot of time. So let's quickly now go to show you how I test animal personality. So the main trait I'm interested in is boldness. And boldness is really the willingness to take risks. And this is the major trait that is studied in my field. And you will understand why it's such an important trait. If you think about all these predators that are out there, think about these feathered predators, like loads of bird species, they really like to eat sticklebacks. But also under the surface, there's, very dangerous predators like this pike here, or even insects. Did you know insects can actually predate on fish? It's really, I was really amazed by it. But this is the larvae of a dragonfly. And when the sticklebacks are very young and small, they really like to eat them. So you have all these costs for sticklebacks to go and explore their streams or their rivers. And therefore, it's really important to not be too bold. But at the same time, fish need to find food. So can it be that fish are actually consistently different from one another in this behavior? Do you have very bold and very shy fish? Well, you saw it already before, this tank in the testing box. And here you can see a schematic. So these tanks I made consist of a deeper, safe area that has plants, and it's quite nice and dark, and then a sand slope reaching to a very shallow, very light area. And then what I can do is I test fish in this tank, and I can see what are they doing, how much time do they spend there in cover, and how much time do they go out. So I do this for like between 30 minutes and an hour for each trial. And then after I house fish individually, and then I give them a couple of rest days. So they're back in their individual compartments, And then I test them again. And this is the important bit, because I want to know, are these fish consistent in this behavior? So I test them twice, and then what I can do is link this behavior to other tests, to other traits they might show. So here's a close-up video of how this looks like. So you can see the fish going out of the cover, exploring this increasingly shallow side of the tank. This is a sped-up version of what you saw. And what I do now to get this automated tracking of the fish is I extract the background image from the video. And all that you are left with is the thing that's moving. And that thing is the stickleback here. And then what you can see is I only had this white background with a black fish. And that is what I track. So you get these really nice trajectories, very detailed over time, with here the color from red to blue for each trajectory. So this is a really great automated way to test loads of fish and see what they're actually doing. So I've now tested a couple hundreds of fish. I lost count. And what we see is there's a large individual variation, which is exactly what we want. So some fish are really shy. They just spend the whole time hiding among the plants here and go only a couple times out. And other fish, they don't really care that much, it seems. They go out and explore, and they just keep on going out all the time. But also, we find that individuals are consistent. If you remember previously how I explained the graph, you can see that fish that are very shy here on day 1, so on the first day of the test, they're quite shy relatively on the second day. And similarly for bold fish that spend a lot of time out, they also spend relatively more time out on the second day. So this is really great. This shows these fish actually have this personality trait of boldness. Then I could really go further and see, like, you know, how does this influence collective behavior? But before I went to look at this collective behavior, I thought, like, can't it just be that these differences in behavior are related to their morphology? So here you can see really these big spines that help them not being eaten by predators. So one idea I had, can't it be that fish that have very long spines might therefore be better protected and therefore go and spend more time out of cover? And this is not what I found. So there was no relationship, as you can see from this whole cloud of points, between the fish's boldness and the spine length they had. And this was relative to the body because it depends also, the body size might also influence the boldness. And also, I didn't find any relationship there. So there really didn't seem to be any link between this and the personality. And this was really interesting because, it really showed there is this consistency and it's not related to these morphological differences. Okay, so now let's go to the collective behavior. So most of the work I've done to study collective behavior is actually the collective behavior of a pair of fish. And the reason for this is to get to the basis of bigger questions you might have. It's good to really think about what is the most simple scenario you can think of. Because if you have very big complex groups with all these personalities, you might lose to find, first the simple questions, the simple situations that are going on. So I tested many random pairs of fish in these tanks that are very similar to the boldness tank, that have a safer deep area, a riskier open area, and the fish could swim with each other and interact through a transparent partition. So in this way, I could still observe the individual behavior and how that influenced the other's behavior while keeping track of each other. And this, by tracking them again, I was able to see when do you find that one fish is leading the other fish. So it goes out of cover first and then is followed by the other. And also, how do the fish move towards each other? Do they really want to hang out together or do they don't really care? So to show you how this looks like, here you can see the tank from above with the cover. And this is that I know is the bold fish. He's going out of cover here, swimming near this transparent wall. And then the shyer fish here, still under cover. What you can see, he suddenly dashes out and sees this bold fish and then tries to swim near it, tries to shoal with it together, while the bold fish just went back to cover. And what I really like to say now, before I talk more about my collective results, is that the Stickleback is a model system for me. I use this to really understand general patterns in behavior. So I'm not only interested in what do the Sticklebacks do, but I'm interested in what do other fish do, what do mammals do, and maybe what do people do. Well, can the behavior that I see in the Sticklebacks, does it apply to these other systems? And this is why many scientists work on different topics and collaborate to really get down to the mechanisms underlying these seemingly more complex behaviors. So it's good to keep in mind, if you think about the things I show here, think about your own life and maybe the animals you see in the street. Do you see one leads the other? Do you see maybe they have personalities? So that's really what I hope you take home from the majority of this talk. So let's look at some results. First, I really like baboons, so I like to show just 2 slides again of these baboons that I studied on the Cape Peninsula. And it's really interesting because also there I noticed these individuals are very different in their boldness. Here, a young one, very bold, climbing on cars and even eating parts, trying to nibble on the car, while other individuals were hidden among the foliage, spending the whole day there. But if you think about boldness yourself, what I realized is that I thought from personal experience, boldness seems often to be linked to responsiveness. If you think about a very risky individual, you think it doesn't listen to what others are doing, it just does its own thing. So the first thing I wanted to look at is, can it be that this is actually really what you find if you study it, if you do scientific projects to look if this is the case? So I used the test I explained before, and indeed what seemed to be the case is that boldness was linked to responsiveness in exactly that way that I just said. So if you remember, fish were first tested alone, so in these boldness tanks, but then they also were tested in these paired combinations. And when I then looked at the bolder and the shyer fish, I saw that these bold fish, when they're by themselves or with another, their behavior doesn't really change. They do more or less the same thing. If you look at the shy fish, they spend twice as much time out of cover. So when there's suddenly another fish, they go and spend time with it outside of cover. And the main reason is probably because it's a lot safer for them, because now there's 2 instead of this fish by itself. So this is quite interesting, that really this big difference in responsiveness. And this was also clear in the consistency. And if you're not really used to seeing loads of graphs, I tried to make it quite simple. And if you see a really nice line here in behavior, it means that the fish behave in the way that you might expect based on the personality. So here you can see again the boldness score, and this is the amount of time they spend out. So you can see here that fish that were very bold here, they also spend a lot of time out when they are with another fish. But then if you look at the shyer fish, there's no relationship here. So what this really shows it seems here, is that their behavior is more explained by their partner. Because some of these fish here, they might all have different partners that influence their behavior. So it's really interesting, again, that these bolder fish really seem to just do their own thing. They go out of cover, and they don't really seem to care as much what their partner is doing. Well, that seems to be more the case for the shyer fish. So with this responsiveness in mind, I thought, I really like to understand more about this leadership behavior. Because if you observe these schools in the wild, you can often see that there's fish in the lead of a shoal and other fish that are following. And you can see this throughout many animal species. So I was wondering, what if you have these leading and following positions? Is this purely by chance? Do they, both do all kinds of fish lead and follow? Or can it be the case that it's the bolder fish that take the lead? And the reason why I thought boldness might be linked to leadership is because these shy fish were really responsive. And if you imagine you're with 2 individuals, and one individual is very responsive and the other isn't, then you might imagine that the much more responsive individual just waits for what the other one is doing, while the less responsive individual that is also more bold and explores more, that guy might think, okay, I'm just going to go out now, and then might be followed by this shy individual. So what I found, this is actually indeed the case. So we've now replicated this finding with a couple experiments, and all the time what we find is that bolder fish, they lead more. And this is just a visual of some more complicated analysis, and it basically shows the kind of likelihood that you see this scenario where both fish are nice and hidden under the plant, and the bolder, the red guy, goes out of cover. And you can see that there's a very high likelihood for this to happen, but a very low likelihood for the shy fish to go out of cover. But next to the bold fish leading more, the shyer fish was found to follow more. So if you look at this part of the picture, so when the bold fish is out, there's a very high likelihood this partner, the shy fish, will join in, but there's not really something happening when the shy fish is out. So this is really cool, because now we can see this responsiveness linked to the personality in a leadership context. We can see this really important link between the two personalities in this trait. And what came forward really is that you have both these personalities of the two fish. So it influences the personality of the fish one's their behavior, and the behavior of the second fish is influenced by their own personality. But then it's really there's the feedback they receive from one another. So again, like imagine you're a fish and you're in this tank I showed you before, and next to you see another fish, and you're both on the cover and you think like, what's happening? I want to explore to explore the environment. Then you see, what is my partner doing? So it really depends on your own personality as well as your partner's personality, what you're doing. And you can imagine if you are yourself a very bold individual, but your friend might even be bolder, then even though you might normally lead others, in those situations that you're with your other bolder friend, they might take the lead. So it's both the personality as well as this complex social feedback that is important. And this really struck me as, so if this social feedback is important, do these fish actually have a long memory? Can they remember what happened in the past? So these fish, they swim in the wilds in free-swimming shoals. So they might now be with a couple fish, then leave that group and go to another one. But what if their experience in that group influences their behavior later? Can it really be the case? So to really ask a specific question, does previous social feedback still influence your role in later behavior? I redid this experiment I explained before, where I get the boldness scores by testing fish by themselves, then testing them with a random partner, and then I just test them another time. And here the yellow fish is the fish I'm interested in, which we call the focal, and then the black and the white are two different partners. And this is the situation I'm interested in. So this is the second pairing, and what I want to know is if this behavior, what this fish is doing, is this influenced by its own personality, its partner's personality, and the personality with who he was 2 days ago. So you can imagine if you, like me, are a keen climber, on this day I am climbing with a friend that is a really great leader, and he takes me to the crag and we go climbing. But actually 2 days ago I was with a very different friend who was he wasn't good in leading me to the climbing wall. So I actually had to help him. Did it actually influence my behavior? So it's in a similar way I try to create a scenario like that. And what I actually found is that the behavior of the bold fish was again very strongly influenced by their own personalities. But now this previous personality had a role. So again, graphs are kind of scary sometimes, but here what this shows is actually that the boldness of the previous partner of a couple of days ago actually made the fish lead less. And what you can see here is fish that in their second pairing, they were paired with this other very bold fish. So what happened in that situation is that their previous partner was also taking the lead. And because they were both taking the lead, they didn't really get that feedback they normally would get from just leading their shyer partner. And this made them less confident. So if you compare the behavior of these fish that didn't have the experience, their behavior is totally different. So it's really interesting to see that even, the behavior of, these simple fish, they still remember what previous fish have done and how their personality influenced their behavior. So again, baboons. So imagine there's differences in sociability as well. Next to this difference in risk aversiveness and boldness, some individuals are, they are fine by themselves. They don't need to be with others all the time. But other individuals are very social. You might know it from yourself. Like I have friends that are much more social than me. They need to be with friends all day, every day. And I have friends that just sit by themselves, happy at home. And now and then I manage to see them, and then we have a great time. But, you can see this in animals as well. Individuals differ in how social they are. So an interesting thing if you think about social behavior as from an animal perspective, if you think about a group of animals, for example, in the park here, you can think, wait, those group of animals are much safer together than if it was just one individual pigeon or squirrel, for example. But if they are together, they're safer. So one reason why individuals might be social is because of safety. And we already know that there's this personality in boldness, which is how risky individuals are. It might be that bolder individuals are less social. So this was what I wanted to study next. So I used this tracking software that I explained previously to study this scenario. And here you can see the trajectories of two fish tested together for a whole hour. And you can see, as you might expect, that the shy fish has less trajectory, so these black lines here. So it spends less time out of cover. But what you also see is this really difference in social attraction. So these fish spend much more time near this partition in the middle, while the bolder fish is on average still closer to the other, but not as much. And then if you look at this behavior, across all the fish that I test, again and again, I find it's mainly the shy fish that are indeed much more social. So we already knew that these shy fish are more likely to follow and bold fish more likely to lead. But they also influence their group cohesion, how much the individuals come together. Because the shyer fish, they really try to be closer to the other fish than the bolder fish. Maybe you can remember that from the video I showed you, where this bold fish went going out of cover, exploring this side, and then suddenly the shy fish dashing out. That was just an example, but it is in general really what you find. So then I wanted to know, how does this influence, again, their collective decisions? So what I found is that there's a white fish here. So that if you look at how good this pair of fish behaved, how good they were coordinated, is that the more social pairs, they behaved much more coordinated. So because these individuals that were both social and then paired together, they moved in and out of cover together. And this is really a benefit for them, because if they are together, their chance of being predated is much lower. Well, if you here, for example, see a very low social fish with very low social attraction, they just do their own thing, and thereby they don't really benefit from being together. So that was very interesting. So what I'm now actually doing, I'm going big scale, because all the experiments I've shown before is what I've done the last couple of years. But now I'm actually, this week, I'm in the middle of my biggest experiment so far. And for this I really, try to test loads of, like a large number of fish in the same way that I did previously. So here you can see 144 fish, schematic of all the fish in the individual compartments. I know what every fish is ID is, so then I can test them on the same personalities. So I test them on the boldness, as I explained before, but now I have the second test, and it's about the sociability again. But instead of using this bigger, complex tanks with two fish and plants, I used a very more simple test that is used a lot in the literature. And what you do is you have a tank with 2 compartments. These are both transparent. And in one compartment, you put a number of other fish. And then what you do is you see how much time does this fish spend near the others. And so for all these 144 fish, I test them on both these tests. I test them a number of times. So it means I spent many, many days in the lab from morning to night, which is very tiring. But luckily, I have all my tracking helping me to observe all their behaviors. And then I get all these different groups. So what I do is I randomly put fish together. So I have 144 fish, so I can create about 30 different groups. And you can see just 16 groups because it couldn't fit on the slide. And these are just an example of the group compositions you can find. Some groups are or more or less the same boldness. Others are very different, with one individual being really social and the others are not. And you can see this really nice range of scores, as you might also expect you can see in the animal world. And this is really exciting because I want to know how do these group patterns of personalities then explain these collective behaviors. And what I also did, I really wanted to see what they're doing in a free swimming shoals like you see in the wild. So no tanks with just 2 fish or partitions. I really want to know how their free swimming motion looks like. And so again, I had to tag the fish on their spines to know who was who. And then I could track the fish individually and then look at their personalities. So this is really what I'm doing tomorrow and the next couple days and week. So I don't really have any results about this yet. But it's really exciting research because as you can see here, it's first of all really beautiful as well, because you can see all the fish, how they respond to one another. But also I can track them. So I get these very accurate positions of the fish. And this, for example, is the start of the trial, where you can see one fish dashed off by itself, and then slowly the others are joining it, after which the group is more behaving as one show of fish. And what's really cool is that from these positional coordinates, I can then get their accurate positions, and I really see what is this group doing as a whole. And then I don't really need to know it's fish. It can be whatever species. And then from these positional coordinates, I can then, can I pass this or not? No. So you can hardly see it, unfortunately, but I can really get all kinds of fascinating aspects of their behavior. So who is this green guy? Is he leading? Are these always following? What are their personalities? And what if you then look at the group as a whole? So here I speed up what they are doing over a whole hour. And you can see they will, I will speed it up, I think, I hope. So you can see they're very cohesive. They swim, there it is. They swim together. And you can see they always almost stay together. They're very polarized. But this is just one group. I have 30 other groups that all show very different behaviors. So it's really exciting, and this is what I'm going to do next. So I already showed this video. Yeah, so I would like to really sum up what I talked to you about today. So as you remember, I'm really interested in these personalities that you see in my sticklebacks, but you can also see in your pets or in more or less any other animal you see out there. And then also their grouping behavior, what they do together. And what I showed you is that, at least for the sticklebacks, I showed they really have these 2 different traits, amongst many others possibly, and that these traits are linked to responsiveness. So bolder individuals were less responsive, while shy individuals were much more responsive, and that there was also a link between them. So bolder fish were in general not so social as shyer fish might be. And that might be explained by this higher safety while being in a group. And then looking at the collective behavior, I saw that boldness is really strongly linked to this leadership. So you find these leading following positions based on this trait. But then sociability was really good for the coordination. So these pairs that consist of very social individuals are much better at moving together. So it really seems like you need both these different traits to really get these groups that are nicely structured with leaders and followers, and that also have this good coordination and cohesion. And then finally, it's really the social feedback that is important as well. because it's not just the personalities being expressed in these fish, but like it depends on the relative personality. As explained before, it can be like the behavior of an individual is generally consistent with its own personality trait underlying, but it also depends with who you are. I would like to thank you for listening. I have lots of people to thank as well. So I have my supervisor, I have a number of collaborators. I have had a couple of student projects. So, if you are keen maybe at whatever time to help out with the sticklebacks, you can help with just catching them or observing their behavior, or maybe in a couple of years when you're further in your studies, you can come and do a real scientific project. So all these people have done really great work that you saw during my slides. Yeah, and I would like to thank these other people. And do you have any questions?